See, my glass is 3/4 full. I'm a real optimist because I've been a fundraiser for so long. It's really wonderful to be here in Denver tonight. You know, this is a very special community. It has a lot in common with two cities that I've called home over the last 25 years, New York and Washington, D.C. Like New York, Denver has such an extraordinary arts community. And I was so pleased when Amy picked me up at the airport today, and she was brave. I think that's the mark of an extraordinary volunteer, one that's willing to go to an airport and find someone that they've never met before at a time when the airports are just packed with people on vacation. And the fact that she would be willing to do that, I think, says a lot for the commitment of the volunteers at this station. Anyway, when we were coming in from the station, from the airport, we drove by the Performing Arts Complex, and it really is extraordinary, and I've been interested in seeing it. I've been to Denver before, but I'd never actually driven past the front of it, and I think it's second only to Lincoln Center in terms of size. I think your similarity to D.C. is your commitment to good citizenship and public service. And I was interested when I was looking up some information about Denver before I came. I always am. One of the things about this job that's been so great is having the opportunity to travel around to places that either I've never been before or that I've only barely visited. And so every time I go into a community, I try to do a tiny bit of research. And I was surprised to learn, I thought I knew a fair amount about Denver, but how many federal government employees are here. And so I do feel in a way like I'm home. Also, both D.C. and New York are home to a very robust sports scene. Actually, I grew up in Baltimore, which also had a fairly robust sports program with, as you, football, hockey, baseball, and basketball teams. In fact, the Rockies are coming to D.C. next week to take on the Washington Nationals at RFK Stadium. And I happen to know this because that happens to be the night that's our unofficial PBS night at the ballpark. And we're working pretty hard to try to get PBS flashed up on the billboard during the game. So it really is wonderful to be here. But I think probably most important and what makes Denver so very special is that you're the home to one of America's great public television stations, Rocky Mountain PBS. And tonight I want to take a few moments to talk to you about my thoughts on Rocky Mountain PBS, as well as the state of public television in the 21st century and the essential role that each and every one of you can play in moving us forward. And then I'd like to leave a little time at the end, so if you have any questions, either I can address them from here or after I've spoken, then I'm comfortable drinking a glass of wine. We can certainly talk over wine. But let me begin by sharing with you a little information that I really do love to share whenever I meet with any group that's interested in public television, and that's the good news of a fact that I'm sure most of you are aware, and that is that earlier this year, the highly respected Roper organization released its annual poll on public trust, and the results are, again, nothing less than extraordinary. For the fourth consecutive year, the American people have named PBS as the nation's most trusted institution, above even Congress and courts of law. I always pause and I wait for people to chuckle. Thank you for those in the back. I know the bar isn't so high, perhaps, but in that same survey, we actually tied with our U.S. military as the best use of federal tax dollars. Now, I know some of you spend time in Washington helping us try to make our case on the Hill. And I think that fact, probably more than any other, the fact of where we're held in people's hearts and minds in terms of use of tax dollars is, I think, the most effective reminder to those in Congress that we are an important part of the fabric of this country. You know, when I hear that fact and when I share it with others, I'm reminded of something that Ken Burns said at our development conference that we held in Baltimore last October. He was talking about the importance of public broadcasting, and he was comparing it to the park system and the library system and so forth. And he made a comment which I have repeated often, because he talked about how important public television is, and he did refer to as the defense of our country, and he said, "I know that PBS has nothing to do with the actual defense of our country. I just know that PBS makes our country worth defending." And I think that that's very true, and certainly for me, and I think for many of you who not only are members of this station, but really give of your time and talent and your heart, that we are an extraordinary organization. We use the power of media to help America meet its greatest challenges. We do it through our public affairs programming, giving Americans a better understanding of our world and empowering Americans to become better citizens. We do it through the arts and bringing ballet and orchestra symphony performances and opera, most recently, to corners of the country that might not otherwise have an opportunity to see these performances. And we help America meet what I think is our greatest challenge, which is our work in the schools and providing teachers with lesson plans and video and training teachers in key subjects like math and science and helping educators teach kids how to read, with particular emphasis in work in some of the poorest areas of the country. That's public television. That's what we do. And so whether you find us, and I thought that James' introduction was so perfect, because whether you find us on a TV set or a computer screen or an iPod or in a classroom or working alongside people that are doing great work in the community, the result is still the same. We open minds, we touch hearts, and we change lives. And so as PBS's president, my goal is to ensure that we keep moving forward and building upon all of the good work that we do. In the area of content, I am working tirelessly with stations to try to figure out how to make sure that we go where our viewers go. You know, until recently, if you wanted to watch a PBS program, you did it the way that we've done it for years, the way that I grew up, the way that all of us grew up, which is we sat in our living room and we stared into that box. Maybe we had family members around us. But today, I mean, you can still do that, and many of us do. But you can also stream programs online. You can download them into an iPod. In fact, I did just come from Los Angeles, where my colleagues and I met with members of the nation's television critics. And over a drink, I will tell you some stories about that. And at that meeting, we announced the addition of several new series to PBS's lineup on iTunes, including the addition of History Detectives, Teletubbies, and now an entire section on iTunes devoted to Ken Burns documentaries and films. These new additions add programs that we put up on iTunes earlier this year, which is Antiques Roadshow, Nova, Scientific American Frontiers, Arthur, and Cyber Chase. We've made many of our shows available to through stations to cable subscribers through video on demand, free on demand, and we have a number of our programs that are available also as free audio podcasts. I think that the era of digital television holds enormous promise for us. And I think the challenge for us is to really think about how we in public television can take the extraordinary content that together we've created over the years and make sure that that content is available to the widest possible audience. This is a great time for us to be experimenting and trying new things, and I know you are just starting to think about some of these issues here, and I really applaud you for doing it, because this is where the future is, and we need to be brave and bold and to try some of this out. And we can't do it just at PBS. We need stations around the country to be out there willing to take some chances and to be bold in bringing us to what I think is an exciting new frontier. When the conversion to digital broadcasting is complete in February of 2009, stations are going to be able to offer viewers their main channel as well as additional channels devoted to whatever you decide you want to broadcast. I know that here in Denver, for example, earlier this year, you launched VMA as one of your efforts in thinking about that new digital future in multicast. And for those of you that don't know what VMA is, it's a 24-hour channel devoted to Spanish language programming. And if you haven't been on the channel, I'll tell you a little bit about it. It includes programs like Nature that are translated into Spanish. It includes 6 hours of preschool programming, including Plaza Sésamo, the Spanish language version of Sesame Street. It includes some public affairs programming, including a 1-hour nightly interview program. In fact, it's interesting, as I'm sure all of you have been following the the terrible situation now with foreclosures, and there is a new strand of programming that's been developed that's specifically targeted towards Spanish language families. It's being broadcast as part of VMA, so that people that are starting to have trouble meeting their mortgage payments realize that there are options that they need to pursue before it's too late. And so I'm really proud of the work that public television is doing in this area with VMA, and I really am looking forward to all of the other programs and services that public television stations are going to be able to provide using this new technology. I really want us to build on our work in education. That's one of the areas that I have a great deal of concern about. And in fact, since I took this job, every speech that I've given, even to the press critics, even though I don't particularly want to hear about our work in education in the classroom, I always use the opportunity to talk about it because I think it is what makes public television so different and so unique. We're known for the educational programs that we've created, shows like Sesame Street and Reading Rainbow, and our newest hit, Curious George, which introduces kids to science and engineering concepts. By the way, Curious George is less than a year old, and it's already the #1 show for kids of the ages between 2 and 5. And we think that's really incredible. We are so proud of the success of that show, and we're looking to build on it with new other programs that we're adding to our lineup this fall. But all of you are very close to public television, so you know something that most people don't know, which is that our education work goes far beyond what we put on the screen. We have expanded our work in training teachers through Teacher Line, which is our program that trains teachers how to use math and science and how to use technology, particularly in teaching math and science. And we have PBS Teachers, which is our new online portal that makes lesson plans and video clips and other resources, including blogs, available to teachers. I want us to play a bigger role in early childhood education. I mean, it's no secret that America faces significant problems in this critical area. Just look at the numbers. More than half of all kindergartners are at a risk of failure in school. Poor kids enter school with half the vocabulary of their wealthier peers. And children from low-income households tend to score 50 to 60 percentage points lower on math and reading tests than kids from middle-class households. By age 13, these kids are on average 5.2 years behind their peers in reading level, dramatically increasing their risk of dropping out of school entirely. I think public television can help reverse these trends. Earlier this year, I announced our intention to play a leadership role in developing preschool curriculum for America's children. And it's a comprehensive plan that will include professional development for early childhood educators and broad outreach to local community partners. The centerpiece of this work that we're doing is an early childhood institute that brings together academic leaders and researchers and content providers to help us regularly test public television's preschool content so that it's not just fun for kids to watch and nice for kids to watch, but that they are experiencing television that will truly make a difference and help them become ready to learn when they enter school. Now, this institute isn't a bricks and mortar type of project. It's a partnership between public television and major universities and other academic organizations that will allow us to invest in research for all of our preschool programming. The challenge, of course, which is a challenge I know that you face, is how do we identify and secure the resources to help us fund all of our ambitious programs, whether it's our work in education or our work in new media. And in today's world, that isn't always easy. This summer, lawmakers in Congress did approve a modest increase in federal funding for public television and radio. And we really appreciate the bipartisan support that we've enjoyed on Capitol Hill, but it's critical that we look for new ways to bring revenue into public broadcasting. I know that you have spent a lot of time over the last couple years focusing on your major gift work and really trying to reach out to the community. We're doing the same thing at PBS. When I was at WNET, 3 years ago, I was involved in helping create a foundation for PBS where we're hoping as well to try to build relationships with major foundations and other major philanthropists to bring in money at the $1 million level and above. We want to make sure that when the next Joan Kroc is ready to make a major gift to public broadcasting, that she makes it to public television. And so we're looking to work in partnership with stations like Rocky Mountain PBS to build up our work in raising money in the community, and I think that when we work together, there is no limit to what we'll be able to do to try to bring in the funding that's going to be so necessary to fund the work that we see so needed and so important. You know, we're a communications organization, but I think that we don't always do such a great job at telling our story, and we have terrific stories to tell. I think that when you think about the work that we do from the public affairs content that we deliver that is so different than what everyone else is trying to do in the public affairs space, we don't scream over each other. We try to have thoughtful dialogue. We try to bring different perspectives around the table. And I think that if we, in this complicated world where the stakes are so high, we really do need to understand the issues. I think that when I look at our work in the arts, and I look at every other dial, every other channel on the dial, and no one else is doing arts programming. That channel A&E, and that's, by the way, A&E stands for Arts and Entertainment. There are no arts programs on A&E. The biggest program on A&E is CSI and The Sopranos, and there's a reason it's now called A&E and not Arts and Entertainment, because as a commercial venture, they couldn't make it work as an arts channel. You know, Bravo was the next great dream of an arts service for our country, and the two top programs on Bravo are Top Chef and Project Runway. Now, I happen to like those shows. I think they're really, you know, very entertaining shows, but they're not quite what public television has done over the years in trying to bring the arts to every part of the country. So I think it's really important, particularly when you look at so many school systems around the country where arts education is not available anymore. We need to be there. We need to be providing arts programming. And I do think that beyond the work in arts, the work that we can do in the schools in math and science and literacy is so profoundly important. And that's the work that we have together to achieve. Now, let me tell you a couple stories, because I think that's what tells the story of public television better than anything else. I have traveled a lot this last year, and I also, when I worked at WNET, I used to do the fundraising drives. And so occasionally people would recognize me. I was always surprised when they recognized me without the 800 number under my chin. But I heard so many amazing stories, and I'll just share a couple of them with you today, because they, I think, do capture the spirit of what we're trying to collectively do together so beautifully. When I was in New York, I went to a soup kitchen that was very close to the station. The largest soup kitchen in New York actually is about 3 blocks from WNET. And I was walking through, and a couple of the folks that were there having lunch recognized me and were talking to me about some things they'd seen on public television. I remember this one guy, and he pulled me aside, and he said, you know, he said, that program that you did last night was so wonderful. And he said, I'm so glad to have the opportunity to meet you, because I want to thank you. And he said, because, you know, I didn't always live this way. He said, I had a really great job, and I used to travel a lot, and I used to go to Lincoln Center, but I've had some difficulties in my life, and that's not possible for me anymore. And he said, but you were the window on the world I used to live in. And he said, you have no idea what you mean to me. And thank you very much. I met a guy when we were taping a broadcast through great performances with the San Francisco Ballet, and he was a young guy, and he was so excited we were taping, and I thought, of course, he was excited because he was going to be on TV, and I think that's part of why he was excited. But the other reason he was so excited is he said, I can't believe great performances. He said, that's how I found out about ballet. He said, I was growing up in New Jersey. And he said, I used to come into the city and dance on the street. And he said, for money. And he said, I had never seen ballet before. And he said, one night I was home and I was flipping through the channels. And he said, and I saw Baryshnikov dance. And he said, man, that was like something I had never seen before. He said, it was fantastic. He said, so I got myself into the High School for Performing Arts. And here he is now at the San Francisco Ballet. One television experience. And here this guy is not only a principal dancer at the San Francisco Ballet, so touching all the people that watch him dance, but also he teaches ballet. So he's helping to bring together that next generation. So about 2 months ago, I was sitting in Washington, and we were having a board meeting. And one of our board members is involved with Kentucky Educational Television. He's on the board, and he was telling me how they get letters and phone calls from people that watch things on public television, and he thought that was really great. And I explained to him that every public television gets those letters because we're community television. People feel that they're a part of us. And he said, you know, and every once in a while, he said, some of them are strange, and some of them are really interesting, and some of them are touching, and some of them you carry with you. And he said, and you know, we got this letter from this woman, and she'd been watching this ballet performance from San Francisco, and I just about fell off my chair. I could feel like the hair, you know, sort of tingling on the back of my neck, and I thought, oh my God, this is Desmond. This is a story I've been telling to almost every group I've met, you know, for the last year, because I just think it's such a wonderful story that represents what public television can do in terms of empowering people and changing lives. Anyway, he said, this woman wrote, and she wrote that she was in her 80s and that she was confined to a wheelchair, and that she had watched this performance and it so moved her. And she said, and when she was a young woman, she said, when I was a young woman, I was a dancer. And but she said, and when I watched your performance, I danced again. That's what you all do. You make this possible. And so whether it's the woman in the wheelchair whose life has been touched by Desmond, or the young budding ballet dancer, or just ballet aficionado who has been touched by him, or all of the people that have had the great fortune of seeing him dance, or the guy that just can't get out much anymore because his life has changed and you open his life. I mean, that's what you do. Or for the child. And I was in New York on 9/11, and what we decided to do after the towers fell and we lost our transmitter is that we would broadcast, and we were only broadcasting through cable because over-the-air television was gone, that rather than cut in and carry the continuing news that everybody else was doing, is we kept our kids' programming going. And after that, I heard from so many people who had children that had a place to go, and adults that somehow found comfort in watching Fred Rogers on that terrible day. You've done that because the support that you bring to this station makes all of these programs possible. And so we have a great legacy that we've built together, and we have an amazing future that we can build together. And so I am so excited to have the opportunity to be in this job and to work with people like you, and extraordinarily talented leadership like you have on this board, and amazing general managers like James. And so we have our task ahead of us now. And I think it's going to be an interesting ride, because we have the chance right now to build programming and content that can touch people in even more profound ways. Think of a kid studying the Civil War that can now go online and download a piece of Ken Burns' Civil War series and have it right there in his living room. Think of the possibilities of that. Think of the work that we can do together. It's really exciting, and I am so pleased to have the opportunity not only to be in this job, but to work with you. And so let's go and do it. So on that note, I want to pause and see if you have any questions or anything that you want to talk about. But thank you for inviting me here. It was a great pit stop on my way back from being with the press.